Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to give you the causation of the cold of all this incredible weather and temperature anomalies that we're seeing across the planet. Staying on the cold, record temperatures in Brazil, coldest ever recorded in Germany, coldest ever recorded in the Netherlands, below zero in Slovakia, anomalous cold across the Nordic nations, snowing in Mongolia, snowing in Turkey, still able to ski 4th of July, record cold across Russia in so many places. I'm saying because the VEI-4 that occurred on the equator and the successive amount of eruptions we've had since the beginning of the year at 50,000 foot plus. We got northern latitude eruptions. Look how much of the atmosphere that covered. You can see the dust in the clouds from the satellites. Multiple eruptions at 50,000 foot plus. I'm saying it's being carried in our jet streams in these same latitudes. This would explain the cool across Europe. This would explain the giant hail. And we have a great timeline in two different grand solar minimums for the delay onset of the volcanic ash cooling and the constriction of agriculture. I already talked about this in my book, Climate Revolution, a whole section on volcanic eruptions coupled with galactic cosmic rays, available now. It is the timeline for what we are facing, and here we are. I've already written about this, and it's in play right now. And this is the timeline. The lower the solar activity, the more volcanic eruptions we're going to have. Simple equation, more volcanoes equal cooler temperatures. Now, with the amount of volcanic ash in our atmosphere, it's very apparent that we are now in the feedback loop of the cooling based on volcanic activity, cosmic rays, not so much the total solar irradiance decreases from the sun, which haven't even really taken effect yet. We're in the beginning of this grand solar minimum. What was expected is something just like this. More volcanic eruptions are going to equal cooler temperatures and a constriction in global agriculture. Prices up, economy contracts, a reset button for us on this planet. Now, if we take a look at the two grand solar minimums here, on the left is the late antique little ice age, which you don't hear much about, circa 535 AD. Now, the top row is the Altai Mountains, and the bottom row is the Alps. You can see the onset of the volcanic eruptions is usually about 4 years when they start to really get a bunch of these eruptions going, a bunch of small ones like we're seeing now, 10, 15, 20, in the 50,000 foot range, and then they start coupling on top where they'll have a VEI 4 and 5, and that'll add into the total. But one thing that is discernible in both of these charts here is late antique little ice age had 2 VEI 7 and 1 VEI 6 during that time. And then we know what happened with Tambora and the Dalton minimum on the right there in the early 1800s. That was a VEI 7 plus. Now, we've ticked up from the VEI 3 right into the VEI 4 already, super early in this grand solar minimum beginning. But we know what the timeline is, so let's kind of forecast this out. And it's not about fear in any way, shape, or form. It's just the way I'm trying to explain it, so perhaps you could get a better handle on what's happening. You can make better choices, make wise choices, looking out into the future on how to protect you and your families. Now, to put this whole video into context, I'm only going to do the first 6 months of this year so you can see how much activity there's been. There was an enormous amount of activity in 2018 as well, but right now it seems to be definitely a step up in intensity. Now, Krakatoa, you heard about this right around the new year when they had the tsunami and went right up to the edges through Jakarta. 55,000 foot eruption, blew the entire top of the mountain off. Spectacular images coming out. Social media is now capturing a lot of this. Mainstream media not publishing a lot of it, so you do have to go to individual sources of people like you and I taking photos saying, hey, this is what we saw. Manam, Papua New Guinea, 55,000 foot eruption. That was on January 8th. So those two happened within days of each other. And I'm saying all of this is the beginning of the year starting to add up, and what is coming to fruition right now, I'm going to run through the cold and then we're going to go back into the eruptions. So let's take a look at what the mainstream media is not covering. They were trumpeting at the top of the lungs, France, all-time record hot. But wait a second, how did they miss all of these record cold ever recorded in the same exact time frame? They just focused on the heat. That's cherry picking. And looking across some of the feeds, still got 20-foot snow drifts in Colorado. Oceans are turning cool, which is going to add and amplify the effect. I'm going to touch in this in the next video. The El Nino is quickly flipping into a La Nina, something very unusual. Just a full-on degree drop in a matter of a month and a half. It turned that quickly. Plus these volcanic eruptions. Absolutely, it's going to be so incredibly cold this winter. And you're going to see some atmospheric disturbances that will not make sense. Unless we're looking on multi-thousand year cycles, then it'll make sense. But even looking just to the beginning of the month here, snow, 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 even in the end of June into July, record cold in Canada. We saw the decimation of the agriculture grow zones in the United States. Montreal, July 8th, set to break a 122-year cold record. Taking a look where the cold is also happening, record cold Germany, record cold Netherlands, record cold Australia, record cold Brazil, Northwest US. It is all-encompassing across the planet, yet the media, I didn't hear about that. I did my own research and I just kept stumbling across these nuggets, which I'm sharing with you. All-time coldest temperatures ever recorded in Brazil for this time of the year. Ever. This waterfall usually does not freeze until the middle of winter in the southern hemisphere, which is 2 months from now. Previous record was 8.8 degrees Celsius. Thermometer reached negative 9.2. That's the coldest temperature ever recorded in this place. That is 2 months early and breaking the all-time coldest winter temperature ever recorded in this location in Urupema. Kept seeing this again and again through the news since 2015, these same areas. And Mauricio, thanks for sharing this one. Even talks about sea level got down to freezing. Sea level beaches down to freezing. Water turns to a solid. I like how he says, you thought Brazil was a hot place? Well, not this year. I was looking out through July 18th. Of course, more cold coming. The southern hemisphere is going into its winter as we are coming into our summer here. I totally get it when it's cold. It's southern hemisphere. They're going into the winter. Another month or so would be something like January, equivalent northern hemisphere. But when you see the Netherlands going into the hottest time of the summer with the record coldest July temperatures ever set, a new all-time record low for the month of July. Scratch my head. Wasn't the media talking about the all-time record heat in France just a few days ago? How did they miss that? You think they would have balanced them, compared them a little bit. And if we jump over to Slovakia, temperatures dropping 1 degree Celsius below zero. That's about 30 degrees Fahrenheit. Water turns to ice then too. And jumping over to Germany, every listing on here is a new record cold temperature broken for this time of the year. So something anomalous is happening. And as well, when we look at the GFS models here for the forecast temperatures, anywhere you see that dark purple, that's 20 degrees or 25 degrees Fahrenheit below normal temperatures. Seems to be centered right over the Nordic areas for the moment, but that is going to be spreading. But look how far it is over into the grow belts of the Ural Mountains stretching east. And the crops are getting into their growth spurt right now, but I wonder how these 25 degree Fahrenheit below normal temperatures would affect crop production in these areas. Will it reel back the yield that they were expecting? How long is this going to stay around? Because when you see summer snows in Mongolia, not normal. Snowing at high altitudes of the Black Sea, Turkey, I know, everybody said, well, it can snow anytime in the mountains, not in the hottest year ever. And when it surprises everybody, that's a check the box. That was a rare one. You got to dig in the record lows in Russia. Top entry there off iceagenow.info, Robert Felix's site. Chile, heavy snows as well, but they're going into the winter, could be expected. But the skiing in Colorado on the 4th of July, not expected. Thought snow was going to be a thing of the past. Don't you remember the experts saying, hey, you should sell your ski resorts because there'll be no more snow? I clearly remember that in both Australia and the United States. But anyway, over into Europe, they're getting this massive, massive hail. This makes sense with volcanic ash nucleation, changes in the jet streams, and faster updrafts. So that's the cold in the last couple of weeks. Now let's take a look at the volcanic eruptions over the first few months and see this latency lag behind. But when I see something like this going up into the atmosphere, that's downright scary. Again, when you look at the density of ash coming out of this eruption in the Kamchatka Peninsula, incredible some of these images coming out. The volcanic eruptions anything that is over 32,000 feet has a cooling effect on our atmosphere. And obviously, if it's going to be that high up, it's going to get caught up in the jet streams. So you just need to take a look at the latitudes of these events and then see where the ash might get pushed to and see if any of these record cold events are right on where the latitude band where the ash would be. Also, FYI down here, if you go down to the southwest, if you will, on this map, that jet stream is incredibly wide. Something is doubling up there. So when you're talking about jet streams moving into new places, collapsing in on each other and looking for new areas in the atmosphere to settle into, right there's one happening in front of your eyes. Grand solar minimum effect, weakening magnetic field right in front of you. So we're going to start with the smallest eruption here first, 12 miles plus up in the atmosphere. Now they say it's difficult to judge some of these because they're in more remote locations, especially far out, Kamchatka Peninsula, out in the sea even in uninhabited islands. But what they're able to do was use sulfur dioxide emissions to track this. So Kamchatka Peninsula is there to the west, and if you follow this island chain down, you're going to come to Japan. Kuril Islands is where this is located. Now, it doesn't really give you such a good gauge of how large this eruption was, but with the low Earth orbit satellite, you can definitely see that is chunky, and it definitely punched that atmospheric layer there. So as the eruption first began, this is the first couple hours here, they were able to get some shots of it, and what I noticed also is something kind of anomalous. If you look just below to the bottom and the left of that eruption, what are those streaks right there that look like a crisscross grid? Interesting. Ship tracks? I don't know how they're so precise like that. It makes a tic-tac-toe pattern. But here we have a close-up on it of the actual plume coming out. That is dense in my personal opinion. You can agree or disagree, but that is intense. But then when you wide out on it, you can really see the dissipation and how that is traveling out into the Pacific Ocean toward the United States, toward Alaska. And then eventually, about a day and a half later, almost 48 hours later, this is what they were showing with the sulfur dioxide dispersion. Now, the volcanic ash is in there too, so it's not just a gas, it's everything together. They're following the cloud here. That is an enormous part of our atmosphere centered over the small bit of that cloud band circulating from 60 degrees north up to the North Pole. Now that ash is going to get dragged around from Alaska over through Canada, and where will it end up? Northern Europe. This would very well explain these cooling temperatures. The ice anomalies that we're seeing, the record cold, it's all going right over that same latitude around 50 north, and it should disperse and be dragged up into the Arctic Circle. Any anomalies happening in the Arctic Circle in this last week? Gee, let me think where the media is focusing on. Now you might say, well, I don't know what you mean by the gas and the ash. I can't visualize it. Well, let me visualize it for you right here. This is the image at sunrise on Himwari. There could be a little bit of moon shadow in there, but you can see how much ash is in the atmosphere from that single eruption. It dissipated, of course, but it was surely mixing in, moving jet streams. Now, NOAA satellite taking a little bit different angle from it, but at the beginning of the eruption, and then we can see, whoa, really start. Look at that gap under the head of that, what we get to that first cloud layer back in what was considered the stratosphere. This thing's going up 50,000 feet. Incredible. I actually think it went higher, but they were just not measuring it correctly, because when we look at the Kuril Islands eruptions, remember that famous photo on the left there from NASA about 10 years ago? Which one's more dense and girthy? Which one has more debris in it? My personal opinion is the one on the left was really light. It punched up through. It even had the gas capturing part of the cloud as it punched up through. The one on the right is more like a sandstorm getting blasted through the clouds, just full-on debris coming out of there. Now, Uluwun, this is a dangerous one because it's right on the equator. And these equatorial eruptions are always the ones that cause an enormous amount of cooling because it just starts at the equator and it gets dragged up through every single cloud band going north. 0 to 30, 30 to 60, 60 to 90, it just keeps getting circulated the whole way through all the cloud band patterns on the planet here. And I'm sure some of that got pulled into the southern hemisphere as well. VEI-4 confirmed now on this eruption, 63,000 plus feet. And I want you to take a look at how this rippled through the atmosphere here. When they say, wow, visible satellite, Uluwun eruption, breathtaking is an understatement. It sent a shock ripple wave through our atmosphere. That's how intense the eruption was. This one here from University of Wisconsin-Madison, lining up the different satellite feeds for us. Dark gray on the right, that is solid material, basically. I encourage you to look at Papua New Guinea, Indonesia, see how the island chain spreads out there, and take a look at PNG and see how big that island chain is. And now for sure, subplinian. So this is definitely an atmospheric covering type of eruption that will lower Earth's temperatures. I cannot believe it didn't get more coverage. This is a major, massive eruption. I know it's not Pinatubo. The only reason that got so much coverage because the U.S. military base got buried in ash. And of course, you know, with the U.S. media picking up on it, they spread it everywhere. If a U.S. military base was down there getting buried in ash, this would also be getting coverage, but it's not. And it is a major eruption. And some right next door, if you will, Manam going off. Same week. This is massive as well. See, this is where we're finally starting to get closer into air traffic patterns where people are starting to take images. Some of these more remote locations, difficult to get glimpses sideways like that. That's terrifying. I would not want to be anywhere near that. And a different glimpse at Uluwun. These are further out shots, pre-eruption vent coming out of there, captured as a flight over. Now this was down in Mexico as well, 50,000 foot. And we keep seeing these again and again, these 50,000 foot eruptions, and now they're really starting to tick above 60, 65,000 feet, well into our atmospheric bands where it's starting to cool the planet, in my personal opinion. In my book, Climate Revolution, which I just released about a week and a half ago, myself and Bill Porter, we wrote about this already. Volcanic eruptions, and also quoting Sasha Dobler from his site, Abrupt Earth Changes, included in our book. This is Etna erupting in this image that you're seeing here this year as well. So what are the chances of all these erupting volcanoes, massive amounts of ash going in our atmosphere? It's not combining into a larger effect. I mean, if you have a 5-gallon bucket and you're pouring 1 glass of water in there at a time, how long will it take before it eventually fills up to a 5-gallon bucket? It's the same thing. 50,000 foot eruption, 60,000 foot eruption, 50,000 foot eruption, 45,000 foot eruption, 55,000 foot eruption. How long before it starts to add up? Remember what happened in Guatemala? That was huge as well. All these eruptions are happening and they're starting to add up to the effect. Grand solar minimum, galactic cosmic rays. You can read more about it in the Climate Revolution. The link's in the description box below. It's fully digital publication, so you can click and go. Where you saw those blue links, those are hyperlinks. You can click out and then do more information directly linked to the stories and information that we were talking about. And one of the sponsors for tonight's video, TrueLeafMarket.com, heirloom and organic seeds. To get ready to grow your food, what you're going to have to do in the future, you're going to need to think about bringing this indoors and protecting it. A, from the cooler temperatures, B, from the hail, and C, from the absurd rains that are now pervading the planet. I'm saying it's all nucleation from the increased volcanic ash. You can agree or disagree. I just presented my point here through a bunch of images for the last 20 minutes. And this is your forecast for solar activity. So the lower we go in the solar activity, the more volcanic eruptions we're going to get. We're just crossing into lower solar activity, which is, we're at the beginning of the cusp of the grand solar minimum right now. The bottom of this event doesn't even occur until 2028 or 2030. And if we're getting this many eruptions already, you are definitely going to need to know how to grow some of your own food, but even more importantly, how to protect it from the elements. This is the next step. We really start needing to talk about solutions because I don't have one on a mass scale except using defunct shopping malls and bringing our agriculture vertical indoors. That's the only solution I see so far. Refurbishing caves maybe, old disused mine shafts to do vertical agriculture. That's kind of it. If anybody else has a solution, I would love to hear it. And thank you for watching. Hope you got something out of the video. The link for Climate Revolution is in the description box below this video. And I'll see you next time.